Hey guys, this is Seth here with, well, not really an LP. I still don't really know what I'm going to pick for a new LP, but to be fair, you could probably guess part of the reason why I haven't really been able to figure that out. It being June, E3 has been happening quite a lot, in fact, more than I was expecting. And it's kind of been distracting me from really being able to think and properly decide what I'm going to do as an LP coming up. I think I have a couple of ideas, but I'm still not 100% sure if I want to do them yet. Because playing them and recording for an LP are two different things. So I have to keep in mind how an LP will work of that game, let alone the game itself. So, I mean, but anyway, this week, I figured, hey, I may as well just change things up a bit and talk about, the E3 conferences, how it went. As of this recording, today is the last day of E3. The doors are supposed to close to the convention, or rather the expo, today. So I'm recording this on the 15th. You guys won't see this until like late June, maybe even the first week of July, I think. Let me see. Hang on. Um yeah, I'd say the last week of June. So it'll still be E3 month, but the last week of June, as a matter of fact, the last day of June is on a Friday, so so but anyway, um but yeah, every day I'm going to be talking about for this week, I will be talking about conferences. Today, I'm going to be today and tomorrow will be two conferences each that were covered. And then Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday will be the big three. So today I'm going to be talking about Bethesda and Devolver. I have a lot to say about both. Because to me they were the worst conferences of E3, but I'll get to explaining why in a moment. Tuesday tomorrow um, is scheduled. Tomorrow will be EA and Ubisoft, so I'll be talking about them next. EA was alright. Ubisoft was probably the second best. Well, would I say the second best? They did. I'll think. I don't know yet. Ubisoft is kind of up in the air because of what followed Ubisoft's conference and stuff like that. But anyway, Tuesday, EA and Ubisoft. Wednesday, is when I get to the big three. So on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, each of those days will have one big three company conference talked about. So Wednesday, I'll be talking about Microsoft. Thursday, Sony. And Friday, Nintendo. I saved Nintendo for last because, boy, did they surpass a lot of expectations I think a lot of people had. But um, that's not until Friday. Today, I wanted to start slow, start, softly. And as I said, Bethesda and Devolver. I wanted to start with them because they basically got started. They were the ones that basically got E3 started. As a matter of fact, to be fair, EA was the first people to do a conference. But um, to be fair, that I didn't want to pair EA with Bethesda and Devolver because Bethesda and Devolver seemed to have been theirs weren't as huge as EA and Ubisoft's were. Um, Still, Bethesda and Devolver did have a conference, but to be fair, I may not even be able to use the term conference legitimately for Devolver, and I'll explain. You probably know why at this point, but I'll explain in a moment. But first, let me start with Bethesda because Bethesda's conference was strange. Not in the sense of Devolver's conference, but it was strange in that they really didn't need. The thing for me was that Bethesda, they talked about Fallout 4 a bit. It was VR. They talked about Skyrim. That was a big thing I was not expecting. Was Skyrim VR? I was that during their conference or was it during? It may have been in another conference at Bethesda's Skyrim VR was talked about. But in any case, Bethesda had Skyrim VR at E3. Um, Shockingly, they had Skyrim on Switch. I knew that Skyrim was going to be on the Switch. I recall writing articles for that for my Nintendo News in the past. What I didn't expect, however, was amiibo support. That was a huge shocker to me. Like, I was not prepared for that. And seeing, I think it was Dovahkiin is his name, dressed up in um, Zelda, like Link's outfit and stuff like that was crazy to me. I love that. That was nice to see. In fact, the general theme was, hey, look at this random Nintendo related announcement that just snuck into their conference. That was basically the general theme of E3. Um, but Bethesda was one of those companies that did that in their conference, where they snuck in a Nintendo related announcement. But other than that, they really should have made their conference only like 30 minutes. I don't think they needed this whole Bethesda Land gimmick. I mean, they were trying to make things interesting. They were trying to make things humorous, you know, and I get that. I don't mind humor in E3 at all. I've laughed at some things that have happened in E3 before. It's just when companies seem to do it in their press conferences, they never seem to do it genuinely, like in a way that feels genuine. Bethesda Land felt forced to me. I did not laugh at Bethesda Land at all. It was not funny. I mean, and I'm the kind of person that does laugh at the very stupid things, um, including very nonsensical stuff, which will lead me later to Devolver's conference. But this just did not feel. It just felt like the best way to compare it is to the Sonic Twitter. They do make some hilarious jokes, but they don't do it in a forceful way. They're not. They don't do it in a way that just feels like you're just going, huh? But going, huh, does not automatically mean, haha, that's funny. To me, there has to be context to it, substance to it to make me laugh. But again, that's more of my taste in humor than rather the conference itself. But this is what I think, not what everyone thinks. So, I mean, if you're looking for a more general uh, opinion of what E3 was about, maybe I don't know, like Game Bomb, Easy Allies, IGN, GameSpot, they tend to be more they tend to be more generic with their analysis rather um of E3. So I don't know, like I don't really feel like if you're going to be targeting humor and comedy in your conferences, I really feel like there's definitely a specific difficult way to go about it, and that's part of the reason why I don't really feel like comedy like Bethesda had with their Bethesda Land thing was really needed to put humor in an E3 conference in a way that feels genuine, feels like when you hear little snide jokes like one Sony had during their conference, which I'll have to remember that later. But there was a nice little side joke that I actually got a laugh at that Sony made. I forget what his name was, but when he came up on stage a second time, uh, he got a laugh out of me. Like those are the kind of jokes I expect. I think looking back on the whole Mr. Caffeine thing with Ubisoft, when Ubisoft did it, that had their Mr. Caffeine conference like 6, 7 years ago or something like that. That was amusing. That, in my opinion, was how you do humor. It's not forced. It's not in your face. You can tell he was just joking around and stuff like that. The whole actual Mr. Caffeine like gimmick, however, as a whole, kind of didn't really make sense to me. But I do feel like in terms of his humor, it was all right. I mean, it was certainly not forceful like I got from Bethesda and Devolver, but in any case, enough about enough about the comedy. I'll get to that more with Devolver because boy, that's where it really just. Oof. But anyway, with Bethesda, their games really they didn't have a whole lot of stuff to show. Um, Compared to like Ubisoft and other conferences, conferences for other companies, for a lot of them anyway, they really didn't show a whole lot. It was mainly just like, what was it, two, three games, and one of them went for, God, 10, 15 minutes, I think. I believe so. It's been days now since it happened, so this is just my immediate post E3 reactions because, like I said, E3 is now technically in the books, but like all of it anyway, including the show floor itself. But God, Bethesda was just that conference where it was just like they're either they didn't need to do a conference, or they should have done. They could have at least dropped the Bethesda Land thing. Just get to the games, like, and not even so much get to the game. Maybe not even getting to the game, but just cutting it down to like a 30-minute conference. That would have been fine. You don't need a conference that lasts an hour. I mean, I understand you're trying to keep things going. You're trying to stretch things out to have a make the conference at least bulky in length, but it really didn't need to be an hour long. And it didn't help that it was as late as it was when they aired it, so it just made it all the more baffling. Like Bethesda and Devolver both did not think through their conference times. I I think that's another issue I have about them. They didn't need to be as late as they were. You can have a conference at a decent time in the West Coast and in the East Coast. Time zones are not that hard to manage in the U.S. because of the sheer fact that the difference is only 3 hours. So it's really easy to deal with, you know? It also helps the fact that it does help the fact that really that entire day, excluding I believe Microsoft's conference, I believe only Microsoft had a conference that day. No, the PC Gaming Show had one too. I forgot. I forgot all about the PC Gaming Show, but to be fair, I didn't include the PC Gaming Show in the thing because, to be honest, I really don't think there was really much of a need. That was more that's more of a technical conference than a game conference, which I don't mind because, well, a lot of the gaming companies have turned down, the amount of technical talk that they do in their conferences, even though E3 is an investor show and it always has been, even though they allowed the public access to this event this year, it still is mainly an investors business media conference. It's like expo. It's not meant to be, like a what is it a PAX or a GDC, where there's a lot more freedom and access and stuff like that. It's not meant to be that way. But the PC gaming show was really, they kind of went a route with stuff that I really don't think it's really worth discussing all that much because PC gaming show really didn't go that detailed with games. A lot of their games were stuff they already had announced. There was a DLC. I forget what game it was. They announced a new DLC for a game, and it was a massive one too. I'm trying to remember what it was called, but I think it was XCOM 2 or something like that. But they announced that. They announced, what was it? Killing Floor 2. They announced DLC for Killing Floor 2. I forgot about that. They did announce some DLC. It was mainly DLC that seemed to get the most newness. Like that seemed to be where all the new announcements came in. Was for DLC. No big deal. Nothing really too significant, but um, nevertheless, there was that. So PC Gaming Show. It definitely had games, definitely had DLC, but it was mainly technical talk, I think. So not really anything that I felt would be worth discussing in this thing. But uh, back to Bethesda, I don't really think Bethesda and Devolver needed their conferences to be as late as they were. Bethesda's was at 9 p.m. Eastern time, and Devolver's thing was at 1 a.m. Eastern. It did not need to be at 1 a.m. Eastern. Bethesda's did not need to be at 9 p.m. Eastern. I get that there's time zones. I get that the West Coast of the U.S. is 3 hours behind, and they're accounting for that. But here's the thing, and it's like I said in debates that I had on Twitter. You can easily West Coast time zones with East Coast time zones. It's not really that hard. E3 is an American event. It's primarily catered to Americans, not just the West Coast. Americans. It's primarily English. You'll see a lot of Japanese developers tagging along with translators. Something that you won't really see at, say, Tokyo Game Show. Um, it is primarily an event catered to American audiences, American culture, It's an American event. So I would expect that not just the West Coast of the US getting catered to with E3, but the East Coast as well. So I would expect the conferences to also be at a friendly time for the East Coast. Now, I know that these conferences, like I said, are based in LA, time zones, again, time zones, but it really shouldn't matter. E3 has now branched out to the point where it's become less so of a West Coast, you know, focused thing, and like I said, an American thing. Um, it really should not be an issue anymore that time zones are still a problem. I don't mind Nintendo's being at noon because at the very least, that's still at a decent time to me. Noon is still decent. East Coast will be wide awake, you know, they'll be doing stuff. West Coast, they'll be getting up, it's early, but it's still a good time. And besides, Nintendo's pre-recorded anyway, so no one really has to attend Nintendo's directs and spotlight presentations. So there's no real urgency for that. That said, though, I don't really like the times that Bethesda and Devolver picked for the conferences. That was really something that also kind of annoyed me. But anyway, enough about. I think I've covered enough about Bethesda. Their games, as for the games themselves, wasn't really a whole lot of variety. It was, like I said, mainly Fallout and Skyrim. So it wasn't really a lot of variety. And again, that adds to my feeling that they really should have trimmed down their conference to being only 30 minutes. And that giant, they had quite a hefty intro too. I don't really feel like, honestly, I feel like the intro went longer than everything else. But I mean, it's an intro, so whatever. But whatever. But they didn't really have a whole lot of variety in games, and I still feel like they should have made it just a 30-minute conference. That said, enough about Bethesda. I'd like to move over to Devolver, because this is going to be what would probably take up the bulk of the video. Devolver's Devolver really was the worst one for me. Bar none. That I'm trying to think of the right way to word it because I don't want to make it sound like like it's no fun allowed or anything like that because I like I said earlier on, I don't mind fun. E3 is okay to have comedy and stuff like that. You just have to implement it right in your conferences. I do not feel like Devolver implemented it right in their conference. It did not. I was not laughing at that at all. I don't even know what the hell it was. I was busy during the whole thing trying to contemplate what the hell is this? Was this a conference? I didn't get the humor at all. I read up responses like on NeoGAF I saw social media and everyone was laughing their asses off at it and saying how it was satire toward the media and I'm looking at it and I didn't see any of that. There was nothing satire about that. I just saw a woman screech about Future for like 2-3 minutes. Very annoyingly, I mind you. That was not a funny joke. Like it just dragged on and on and on and on and on, and then just out of nowhere, head explodes, conference ends. I just and I was just sitting there like, what in the absolute? What was the point of this? I mean, it really wasn't. They didn't even really announce anything. Um, and if they did announce anything, it was buried in all the freaking nonsense that they were doing. Like there's absolutely I'm not even really it's not even that I'm mad at the conference. I was too tired at the time to even be mad. Um there was nothing about E3 that made me mad. And I do want to clear that out of the way. I'm not salty. I was even like I just went to bed not long after the Devolver's conference ended and just like all right, bedtime for me. It didn't really bother me. It was just like I really don't understand why they didn't just make this a YouTube video. If they had just made this if they had just uploaded this as a 20-minute long YouTube video, it's worth noting this was like 20-25 minutes long. They did this crap for 20-25 minutes. I don't feel like that was necessary either, but nevertheless, if they had uploaded this to just YouTube as just a comedy video side thing, I could have tuned into it like later in the morning or something like that, watched it, and probably more than likely I would be more warmed up to it because it wasn't meant to be painted as a full-on They even said that there was no game reveal. So I went into Devolver's conference thinking, all right, not that big of a deal. I'm not going to expect a whole lot. Not expecting much at all. I E3, this E3 was the E3 where every expectation I had was completely and utterly shattered. I went into this thinking, Devolver would probably have a strange, conference. They wouldn't have a whole lot to show off, as I knew. Nothing really noteworthy. Then it turned out Devolver's conference became more than noteworthy just on the sheer basis alone that it was an absolute nonsensical 20-minute long, like, it's, I'm trying to think of the right word, but no, I guess nonsense, really. Just, I know I said nonsense already, but that really just how Devolver's thing was to me. I even gave it more thought, like, when I woke up and I was, busy writing articles, and I was reading back in the, I was reading more reactions to their thing, and I just thought, I still don't understand it. Like, after I had woken up and I was more conscious and, you know, able to think more clearly about what I had seen, I still couldn't really understand it. It just dragged on and on and on and on, and it just wasn't funny to me. It didn't even help that, as I said, this is more so my type of humor than anything. I don't just laugh at nothing, you know. That's what this whole conference was nothing. I don't laugh at that. There's got to be context behind this. I don't laugh at random head explosions or, stuff like that. That's just not my type of humor. And if that's your type of humor, congratulations, I mean, I'm good. I mean, I'm glad for you. I'm glad you enjoyed the Devolver's conference and you had a good time, but that's just not my type of humor. People who did not enjoy that type of humor did not like that conference. Now, to say again, like I said, I'm not mad. I think the people who were actually legitimately mad about Devolver's, conference really are overdoing it. I don't really feel like Devolver's conference was good, but it's nothing to get upset and, actually like angry about. It was still a waste of time though. I still do not feel like that Devolver should have done a thing. And if they should have, it should have been a YouTube video. So overall, Bethesda and Devolver really did have the weakest showing at E3 this year. I mean, yeah, Devolver did have a giant, like, they called it a pre-show, and they're still calling it, even hours later, which confused me even more. It's like, okay, they, what is a like, they kept calling it weird, like, they just made no sense to me. I didn't understand anything they were doing. I mean, it was so weird. But that said, I think I've gone on long enough about Bethesda and Devolver. Like I said, didn't really have a whole lot to show, and as I said, they were the weakest of the bunch. But they did, they had Bethesda had stuff to show. Devolver just absolutely freaking confused me. Easily among the worst conferences I've seen in E3 at an E3 in a long time. But again, as I said, it didn't actually anger me. It just confused me. I mean, it was just, I don't even know what to call it. I don't even know if it was a conference. I don't even know what to call it. It was a thing. But anyway, guys, I will see you tomorrow for Tuesday's installment of this post E3 nonsense of my own, I guess. But on Tuesday, EA and Ubisoft are next. I have some more positive things to say about that then. So if you feel like all the negativity in this one has been a turn off, don't worry. There's not going to be as much negativity coming up in the next there won't be as much negativity in the coming episodes. I make a little negative about Sony and Microsoft and EA, but I'll have a lot more plus things to say about them as well than I could say about Bethesda and Devolver. So that said, I will see you out guys tomorrow. But for now, this is Stuff signing out. Sayonara, guys.